My brother accidentally hired the creepiest wedding officiant. He ruined the ceremony.
Sounds like it came straight from Seinfeld.
This takes place about 2.5 years ago when the officiant of my brother's wedding, who was also the bride's father's best friend, completely ruined the brother's ceremony. By the way, this comes from user Mortgage on the r/OK Storytime subreddit. So, for context, my sister-in-law wanted to have her uncle officiate her wedding, but a few months beforehand, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. This is when the donkey, who is sister-in-law's father's best friend of many years, offered to take her uncle's place and officiate the wedding. By the way, the uncle is doing well and is in remission as of today. Nice. Now, the wedding was being held at a resort in Cancun, which is great for me because the legal drinking age there was 18. I was a bridesmaid, but because I live in Texas and my brother and sister-in-law live in California, I was unable to be a part of any bachelorette activities. This didn't bother me, but it meant that I did not know or was not very familiar with most of the bridal party. Being 3 states away also meant that I had never met Donkey before, but I honestly consider that a blessing. At some point, a couple days before the wedding, I had actually noticed him hanging around sister-in-law's father, but I had no idea who he was. Honestly, there wasn't much to notice about him other than he gave off creepy uncle vibes. I'm imagining like Uncle Jack from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
At the wedding rehearsal, he was absolutely nowhere to be found, or maybe I was just too hungover to notice. Yeah, Cancun will do that to you. Now, I'm not well versed in weddings or wedding etiquette, but I'm pretty sure that the person who's responsible for guiding the flow of the ceremony would want to be at the literal rehearsal for the wedding he's officiating the next day. But I digress. The rehearsal goes off without a hitch and everyone heads to the beachside restaurant where the dinner is being held. There is where I would have my first encounter with him. I'm seated at the end of the table with the rest of the bridal party. The dinner orders have already been taken and everybody is enjoying small talk with their neighbors. In Abby Lee voice, when all of a sudden, I feel a heavy presence on my left side and I look over to see none other than the donkey kneeling next to me. He introduces himself with his name, let's say Rick, but he finishes his statement by saying, with one eye, and then proceeds to shove his finger into his eye, which turned out to be fake and made of glass. Looking around at the bridesmaids and groomsmen that were sitting closest to me, all of them were clearly very uncomfortable looking in any direction other than ours, and I could tell that I would not be receiving any backup whatsoever. Despite the weird introduction, I tell him my name and shake his hand, which was kind of sweaty, and he proceeds to ask me how I know the bride and groom. Low-key, why are we shaming someone for having hyperhidrosis?
You probably had clammy hands, bro.
He was nervous. He'd been planning that bit with the eyeball.
I don't know how old this guy is, but I definitely know OP is under the age of 21.
OP's like, yeah, 18.
Maybe you should check that one eye you got, that Rick.
He asked me how I knew the bride and groom. I inform him that I'm the groom's sister. He then gets this creepy look on his face and looks between my brother, who's on the opposite side of the long table, and I, and says, "Ah, I see looks run in the family." All right, not cool with that.
That's why he was so sweaty.
He's so sweaty because he's like, look at all these hotties. Gross. That's gross. Mind you, my brother is actually my stepbrother. I gave him a small laugh because the only other alternative would be to hit him right in his stupid glass eye, but I wasn't going to cause a scene at my brother's rehearsal dinner. Also, that's not the only alternative. Your only choices when confronted with an awkward encounter are not like complete ignorance.
Probably like instinct. She's probably saying her instinct was to punch this guy in the eye.
But I wasn't going to cause a scene at my brother's rehearsal dinner. He then continues to say something along the lines of, you know, back in my day, if I had seen you. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, he didn't finish what he was saying as the waitstaff started to swarm around us to deliver our fresh meals. After he was interrupted, he just looks back at me and excuses himself, stating the food is coming out and that he has to go back to his table. I was genuinely at a loss for what to think after the weird interaction I had. It wasn't until the bridesmaid next to me filled me in on who he is exactly. It turns out that he is the officiant, sister-in-law's father's best friend, and the woman sitting next to him at the table is his 7th wife.
Trying to find an 8th.
Hey, he's looking for the 8th right now. Some of the other bridesmaids started to speak up about their own experiences with him and how much of a creep he is. Basically, the general consensus is that this man is weird AF. The next morning, which was the day of the wedding, goes smoothly, with only a few minor setbacks and adjustments needing to be made. But otherwise, getting ready was an easygoing process. All in all, the sister-in-law felt beautiful, we felt beautiful, and her parents were able to have a first look in her bridal suite with the photographer. It was a very special moment to be in that room. My brother and sister-in-law wanted to say their vows to each other before the ceremony in a private area of the resort with their videographer. Only the vows and ceremony were recorded like this. On the beach, we all get into our places so that we can start walking down the aisle. Even though the beach is private, there are still people from the resort relaxing on the sand and enjoying their beach day. Luckily, when some people noticed a wedding was starting to take place, they all moved further down the beach so as to not be in the way. There was a light breeze that kept our skin cool from the heat of the sun, and just enough cloud coverage to prevent nasty sunburns. It was the perfect day for a wedding. Yeah, it sounds like it. Now for the crap show.
Oh boy.
When the entrance music plays and we start making our descent down the sandy aisle, it takes me not even half of the aisle length to take full notice of the outfit that Donkey Man is wearing as he stands at the center of the altar. He has on a white button-up that is only half buttoned with bright red slacks and a matching red bow tie with a pair of aviator sunglasses. He looks like he was auditioning for Too Hot to Handle. And that's not the worst of it. His 7th wife, who was sitting in the first row designated for the groom's family, was wearing a matching outfit. Her blouse was bright red and completely sequined, paired with skinny white jeans in what looked like 8-inch wedges. No one was even wearing shoes, and the wedding colors were neutrals. Everyone in our bridal party was wearing white, so they stood out. At least somebody matched his freak, you know what I mean? His 7th wife might be the final one for him.
The final boss.
Find you a 7th wife who matches your ridiculous red outfit at the wedding that you officiate.
Well, she agreed to marry him, probably knowing he's been married 6 times before. So, like, who knows what this woman's state of mind is?
Red sequin dress. That's her state of mind. Moving on, it's sister-in-law's turn to walk down with her father. She looked so beautiful, and as she walked down the aisle, the sun was just at the start of golden hour. So it looked like she was bringing the sunshine down with her as she descended the sand. That's a beautiful image. Her father hands her off to my brother, and the ceremony commences. I'm not really sure the best way to describe the words that came out of his mouth, so here's a sequence of events. Oh boy. He starts talking about how long he's known sister-in-law and has watched her grow up. It was a cute start that had everybody smiling. He then starts trying to be funny by pretending to not know who the best man is for a good minute, who has the rings in his pocket. When he finally remembers who the best man is, he takes the rings, and before he goes to hand them off to the couple, he shouts at the top of his lungs like a battle cry, "Who's ready for some football?" with his fist raised in the air. So far, the only thing I've liked has been the eyeball bit.
Yeah, dude, that rubbed me the wrong way.
And it looks like he's not the cool version of the eyeball bit. He's the very not cool version of the eyeball.
You have to have some swag to pull off the eyeball bit.
You do. You have to have a little finesse. You got to have a little tact. He is executing this entirely wrong. No one's ready for football right now, dude. At one point, he started playing the harmonica. Then the grand finale, when Donkey was done making a total fool of himself and told the bride and groom to kiss, his wife ran up to the altar and threw plastic confetti stars all over the sand and in the air. The pieces were small but kind of sharp, and since none of us had shoes, we had to walk very carefully through the sand throughout the remainder of the after-ceremony photos. None of this was approved by the bride or groom, and it was all basically improvised. And you're throwing microplastics into the beach.
We already have it in us, so what's the point?
At some points, while he's speaking, I watched the timer on the audio recorder that's attached to his microphone, and the entire ceremony, from the moment he started speaking to when the bride and groom kissed, lasted between 4 and 5 minutes. The guests were seated for about 15 minutes. I just remember being in complete shock and looking around at the guests to try and gauge the general reaction and see if they felt the same way I did. Everyone in attendance had the exact same expression of, what is happening and how are we supposed to react to this? Her parents were livid and so were mine. When the "you may kiss the bride" moment happened, the maid of honor grabbed Donkey by the arm and pulled him out from behind the newlyweds so that he would not be in the background. Bless her heart for not yanking harder. From there, the rest of the wedding went on without any issues. Unfortunately, the damage had been done, and the maid of honor and I had to console sister-in-law in the bathroom at her reception. She had been holding up like a true trooper, but several drinks later, I think the emotions got to her. My sister-in-law is an absolute saint of a woman, and seeing her like that was heartbreaking. Turns out, Donkey had a greater impact than on just the wedding party and guests. Onlookers from the beach would approach us to ask about what was up with that ceremony. Family members were asking if sister-in-law was okay, to which I asked them not to try and talk with her about it tonight, as she is trying to enjoy what's left of her wedding day. I reassured sister-in-law that nobody would think her wedding was bad and that everyone's thoughts of the ceremony were reflections of that man's actions and not of her. Her father told him to kick rocks after the ceremony, and the next day gave him enough earfuls to last a decade. Even sister-in-law's mother, who is normally a very quiet and polite woman, was yelling the ugliest of profanities at him. Then, when her parents were done, my brother and I's mom had a go at him, and she's a lot less reserved with her words. Unfortunately for him and his wife, they were stuck in the resort with us for another 3 days, and they spent those days trying to avoid anyone that had anything to do with the wedding. That's what happens when you make that many oopsies as an officiant at the wedding. Big old oopsies.
Dude, this is crazy.
Yeah. But you know what else is crazy?
What's that?
The fact that we go live every weekday at 3 p.m. PST on YouTube and Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch. All you got to do is tap on our profile.
Easy.
And you'll join our live. We might even be live right now, so go check right after this story. We do have a little bit of story left here.
Okay.
Now, is there anything that you would have done differently? Would you have pulled the plug on the officiant earlier?
Honestly, if I was the father of the bride, I would be like, all right, we're going to redo this. I'm going to say, run from the top. You get the heck out of here. And then I would do it myself. I would go to the back, look up, okay, what do I have to say? Great. Because they're already legally married by an officiant, but now we're going to actually do it again. Yeah. And I'd run it back. If I was the father of the groom, I'd talk to him and go to the bride's father and be like, hey, can we redo this? Because I don't know what happened. Like, this is super off.
But let's see how this story finishes. Sister-in-law was not close with the donkey man, but she thought that he would at the very least take her wedding seriously, being that her father is his best friend. But he ruined one of the most special moments of their lives. It felt like he had turned their wedding into his personal comedy club, except none of the jokes were funny. Not to mention the weird, perverted comments he would say to the other bridesmaids, which were much more crude than what he told me. And the fact that he's like 80 with a 7th wife who's just as bad as him. To this day, sister-in-law's family has never spoken another word to him. And that is the final word of that story.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't think you ever speak to that guy again. And low key, I'm gonna be like, Dad.
Why are you guys friends?
I mean, he's gonna be like, hey, he's fine. You can't put him in charge, all right? I should have known. Anyway, that is the end of that story.